Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing today? Welcome to everyone who's here. Welcome to our live stream audience. We are live streaming this to a virtual audience. I'm Natasha. I'm the city lead here at Foundation Center San Francisco. I'm really looking forward to this program today with Senior Program Director Diane DeBasella and Teresa Hubbard, a program specialist at Fractured Atlas, and they're here to talk about fiscal sponsorship plus crowdfunding equals $ for creative projects. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand things off to Diane. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thanks, Natasha. Hi, everybody. My name is Diane DeBasella, and as Natasha mentioned, I'm the Senior Program Director at Fractured Atlas. How many of you are familiar with Fractured Atlas? Any of you members of Fractured Atlas? Okay. So I've been working at Fractured Atlas for the last 9 years, and my focus there is helping artists and arts organizations raise money. I have a background in photography, and my focus is really on the education side of fundraising and how to actually ask people for money, how to find grants that are a good fit for you, and how to craft materials that tell a compelling story that either individuals or funders want to read and are engaged by. So today I'm going to focus on the fiscal sponsorship side, and then Teresa is going to step in and take over and talk about crowdfunding. But I am going to be directly leaving when I finish speaking because I have to drive back to LA tonight, so I'm trying to avoid some traffic. So I apologize ahead of time that I'll be walking out the door in the middle of Teresa taking over, but there'll be time for questions from me before I go. So, for those of you that are not familiar with Fractured Atlas, yes?
Do you have some cards? I know you have to.
Yes, we left some materials on the check-in desk, yeah. So for those of you that are not familiar with Fractured Atlas, we are a nonprofit arts and technology company. And we are focused on helping artists and arts organizations by building online business tools for them. We are trying to empower artists so that they can spend less time on the sort of like nitty-gritty business stuff and more time on actually practicing your artwork. We have a variety of different programs and services at Fractured Atlas, and those include our fiscal sponsorship program that I'm going to talk a little bit extensively about. We have an insurance program, and the insurance program is focused on getting access to different types of business insurance. So if you are in need of purchasing, let's say, liability insurance, or if you are renting equipment and somebody tells you that you need to have equipment coverage, or if you are forming a board of directors and you need to have officers and directors insurance, we can help you get access to any of those types of insurance. And what we do is we negotiate the rates ahead of time with the insurance companies, and we've created customized quotes on our website so that you can apply for a quote specifically for the type of art that you're producing. This is a very accessible way to get insurance because we're trying to translate the insurance terms into our arts language, and we're also trying to make sure that the insurance companies understand what you're doing and what the risk actually is. Our goal is to get you the cheapest insurance out there and to make sure you're not buying something that you don't need. Just really briefly to mention our other programs, we also have a program called Space Finder. And Space Finder is an online marketplace. It's software that we've created that helps you to find space. So it does exist here in the Bay Area. It's called Bay Area Space Finder. And if you're looking for, let's say, a rehearsal space in a certain neighborhood for a certain hourly price, you can actually go on to the website and search for that. If you're looking for a specific type of floor or a space with a piano or a space with a certain amount of seats, you can sort of list your criteria and search in that way. For the people online, we also have it in 13 other communities, I believe, throughout the United States. And those are in some major metropolitan areas and also statewide. So for example, we have Space Finder Minnesota because all of Minnesota wanted to list their spaces. But we have Space Finder New York and LA and a number of others. So if you are active in any of these other communities and you need space, you can search on our website. Lastly, Artfully, which is ticketing software and a CRM software. So it helps you to sell tickets and manage your patrons. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in conjunction with fiscal sponsorship, so I won't go into details about it now. But those are sort of the general programs that we have at Fractured Atlas. What we are really trying to do is break down barriers for artists, and we just want to make sure that you have access to the resources that you need to actually be creating the work that is important to you. We have artists in all different disciplines, at all different stages in their careers, at all different geographical locations around the United States. We're national, and we are based in New York City, but we have over 50,000, we have over 53,000 members around the country. We have over 3,700 active fiscally sponsored projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about what fiscal sponsorship is. Our projects have raised over $97 million through our fiscal sponsorship program, and we have bound over 15,000 insurance policies on behalf of artists and arts organizations. Collectively, if you look at the artist community that we're reaching throughout the United States, we are reaching over 400,000 artists through our 53,000 members. So while you might be one individual artist, you likely are working with other artists that are hopefully benefiting from some of the services that we're offering. We support artists in all different disciplines. So if you are a musician, if you are a theater artist, if you are a visual artist, if you are a creative gardener, really however you define what your art is something that we can help you with. And we do not curate your work in any way, so we're not judging the artistic merit of your work. We're really just asking you to, come to us and say, this is what I'm working on and I need a little bit of help or support with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about fiscal sponsorship now, and then once I'm through with this section, Teresa will talk about crowdfunding. So how familiar are people with fiscal sponsorship? Who knows about fiscal sponsorship? A little bit, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about legally what it means, and then how it actually works at Fractured Atlas. So fiscal sponsorship is typically a fundraising tool that enables either an individual artist or an arts organization to use the benefits of a nonprofit's 501c3 status. So what that means is if you want to raise money, you can basically come under our umbrella and receive tax-deductible donations and apply for grants that typically only a nonprofit can apply for. So that's sort of the core benefit of fiscal sponsorship. But what does that actually mean? It's something that sometimes when I talk about this, people are like, I think I get it, but I'm not quite sure how it works. The way that it works is that you need some money, and we actually have the money given directly to Fractured Atlas. I'm doing this. Yep, there we go. Sorry, it looks a little different on here when I'm clicking it. So, so if a donor gives directly to Fractured Atlas for the purposes of your work, what we do is we issue them a tax receipt, and then Fractured Atlas takes that money and we give it to the artist. So the money is basically coming through Fractured Atlas. We are accepting it as a charitable contribution from the donor or from the grant maker, and then we are giving it to you to use for expenses related to your artistic work.
And what is the percentage that you take?
I'll be getting to that. So all of the funds that are raised through the fiscal sponsorship program are considered taxable income to the recipient. And this is a really important part that I think sometimes people don't realize, is that even though it's tax deductible to the person that's giving it, when you actually receive it, it's technically considered grant income. So we issue it to you in the form of a grant, and grants are considered taxable income by the IRS. So you do have to report that income on your taxes. So if you raise $10,000 through Fractured Atlas, your tax liability is going to increase by $10,000. We try to make sure that you're only spending this money on activities related to your artistic work. So you should be able to offset that income with your expenses. And we do have accountants that we work with that we can recommend to help you file your taxes if it's something that you've never done before with that kind of income.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Is there any recommendations before, like with write-offs and things like that, but before tax season comes up, that there might be some advice on that?
Sure. The question is are there any recommendations? I'm announcing it for the live stream. Are there any recommendations for tax season for write-offs? We do some blog posts about filing your taxes and things to keep in mind. In general, like keeping all of your receipts. There is endless things that you can deduct when you're actually filing your taxes. Mm-hmm. So if you go out to lunch with somebody and you talk about your project and you pay for that lunch, you can write that off on your taxes. If you are traveling, using your own vehicle, there are certain restrictions within the IRS tax code about like how you can deduct those expenses. We're not experts in tax law, so we try to provide you with resources to other accountants out there that can sort of guide you through that. But if you're looking for somebody to talk to, we're happy to make a recommendation. So there are different types of donations that come through. So if people can hold their questions actually until I'm done, that would be great. Thank you. No, it's okay. There's just more questions coming up. So there are different types of donations that can be made to Fractured Atlas on your behalf. People can write checks to Fractured Atlas. So they would just write a check to Fractured Atlas and you would report it online to us. So basically, if somebody mails you a check that is payable to Fractured Atlas, we ask you to go onto our website and report it to us so that we know when the check arrives in our office which project it's for. You can imagine with 3,700 projects that we don't want checks mailed directly to us that just say, "Dear Diane, good luck, love Aunt Sarah." We won't know who that donation is intended for, so it's helpful for you to do that first. We can also accept credit card donations, so all of our projects have a unique landing page on our website for donations by credit card. We can also accept non-cash gifts. So if somebody wants to donate this podium to your project, and this podium is probably valued at, say, $200, got a nice mic installed in it, we can issue a tax receipt to that donor for $200. Related to the administrative fee that you asked about, all fiscal sponsors charge an administrative fee. This is fairly standard across the field. And our administrative fee is 7% for all credit card donations. So if you are processing any type of credit card donation, it's going to be charged 7% fee. If you are receiving checks, we actually reduce the fee as you go, and it's basically over the lifetime of your fundraising. So if you raise up to $150,000 by check, we'll charge you 7%. Between $150,000 and $500,000, it drops to 6%. Above $500,000, it drops to 5%, and above $1 million, it drops to 4%. So we also have to, within the fiscal sponsorship program, maintain discretion and control over how you are doing your fundraising and how you are spending the money. And this is because we're a public charity, and so we're required by law to follow certain procedures when we're fundraising. And ultimately what you're doing is you're fundraising for Fractured Atlas for the purposes of your project. So what we ask is that if you are writing an individual appeal letter, if you are running a crowdfunding campaign, if you are applying for a grant, that you show us those materials first. And that's to make sure that if that individual donor comes back to us and asks us questions, that we can actually say, oh yes, we know they sent this letter on April 1st. Or if a foundation has questions about your grant proposal, that we have a copy of it that we can actually reference. And I'll talk a little bit more about that review process in a couple of more slides. We also, when you are releasing the money, we ask that you tell us how you are spending the money. So if you raise $10,000 and you come to us and you say, I need $3,000 to rent a space for a theater production that I'm putting on, we're going to ask you if you have a contract for that space, if you have a quote, if you have some sort of documentation showing what that expense actually is. We don't do that for every single penny that we release to you, but at certain thresholds we will say to you, can you give us that documentation up front? This is also just a best practice for your own tax purposes to have that documentation. So at the end of the tax year, you know when you go to file your taxes where all of that is. We also ask you to file an annual report with Fractured Atlas. And the annual report is something that happens once per year. At the beginning of each calendar year, we'll start saying to you, your annual report is due on April 1st, and we'll remind you each month a couple of times. The annual report is a brief narrative section that asks you to tell us what you did over the past year with your project. And then it asks you for a itemized list of your expenses. So we'll tell you, you released $3,000 for space, you spent $2,000 on paying artists, you spent $500 on transportation. Did any of this change? Could you give us a complete picture of the activities throughout the year, just so we have an idea of what you actually did with the funds that were raised through us? Some of the benefits of fiscal sponsorship are not just that sort of tax status and the ability to receive tax-deductible donations. Through our program, you also have access 24 hours to your fiscal sponsorship online. So what this means is that you can, at any time, you can log on to our website and you can review your complete fund history. So you can see who all of your donors are, you can download their tax receipts, you can get access to their contact information, and you can request funds from us through that system. So it's something that you don't have to wait in a queue to ask us for the money. You can really maintain and sort of control that at your own pace. That was the first one. The second one is that we can release the money by electronic fund transfer. So as soon as we receive the money, it becomes available to you 7 days later. You can request those funds and we'll transfer it directly into your bank account. So it gets to you pretty quickly. There's not a huge lag time between when we receive the donations and when you can actually spend them. Try to make it as easy and painless as possible. As a fiscally sponsored project, you also have access to nonprofit rates. So nonprofit rates are, if you're renting that theater space, you could go to the theater and say, I'm associated with Fractured Atlas, will you offer me a discount on the normal rate? Often places will offer something like 5 to 25% off the normal rate if they know that you are operating as a nonprofit project. And then lastly, you get access to our staff, which what we do is we do a ton of one-on-one coaching, trying to help make sure that your materials and the way that you're asking is appropriate and that it's strong. So we will talk to you about your fundraising plans, we'll talk to you about how to cultivate donors, how to prospect for foundations out there. So we try to be available and accessible so that you actually don't feel like you're totally alone in your fundraising, because it can be hard out there. We also have a partnership with Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding platform. And our partnership with Indiegogo, Teresa's going to talk a ton about crowdfunding and sort of how to do it well. But our partnership with Indiegogo, what it does is it enables you to build a crowdfunding campaign on their website and to issue tax receipts to the donors who come in through their website. So it's fairly seamless in that the money actually all comes to Fractured Atlas. It doesn't go to Indiegogo, and we release it the same way we would release the normal fiscal sponsorship money that you're raising. With Indiegogo, there is a change in the fee. So the fee is 7%. Plus, there's a PayPal processing fee of 3%. So the total fee for using Indiegogo through Fractured Atlas is 10%. I just try to make sure people are aware of that before they enter into that and factor into their budget as well. So we also integrate seamlessly with Artfully, which is our software for ticketing and customer management. Artfully is a product that's produced by Fractured Atlas. And if, let's say, you have an event that you're selling tickets, you can sell tickets through the Artfully website, but it also connects to your fiscal sponsorship so that you can manage your patrons. And what this means is if you are somebody that you are sending out an appeal letter each year to, let's say, a couple of hundred people, you're running a crowdfunding campaign, you're applying to grants, and you have audience members, you can track all of them through this software. So you could see, did this person come to my exhibition and reply to my individual appeal letter? Are they related to a foundation that I also submitted a grant proposal to? Artfully also connects with MailChimp, so you can track when you're sending out newsletters through MailChimp. MailChimp. MailChimp.
Chimp, like
MailChimp.
monkey. Oh, MailChimp.
MailChimp. It also connects with MailChimp so that if you're sending out newsletters to your patrons and your audience, you can actually track the correspondence in Artfully that you're having with them and see how successful these sort of newsletters and appeals and stuff that you're sending out are. So anytime you have donors to the Fiscal Sponsorship Program, they're automatically imported into Artfully. So you don't have to manually pull it over, it just happens for you. So, in order to apply for fiscal sponsorship at Fractured Atlas, the deadline is the last day of each month. So this month it is March 31st. I think that's on the next slide. The criteria for becoming fiscally sponsored is fairly straightforward. We aim to be as inclusive as possible. So we are looking for projects that define themselves as creative or artistic, and that is up to you to define what that means. Again, we're not judging your work. We're not saying your work isn't good enough to be part of our program. We just need to know that it fits within our mission of supporting the arts. So it has to have some sort of artistic or creative aspect. And the second thing that it has to have is a public benefit. A public benefit is defined as having an audience and being able to define who that audience is. So, in this room right now, you guys are my audience. And online, they're also the audience. So it can be as simple as something like I'm having an exhibition and 20 people are going to come and see this exhibition. But you just need to be able to articulate what that is. If you write to us and you say that I'm painting alone in my studio and no one is ever going to see my work, you will not be able to be approved for fiscal sponsorship. So there has to be somebody that is benefiting from the creation of your work. I keep using the term project, and sometimes people get a little bit confused by this. So that's what we call all of the projects that are within our program. We refer to them as projects. But they are actually sort of all different types of individual artists. Some of them are collectives. Some of them are organizations. And some of them are doing a one-time project where their project is called Romeo and Juliet, and they put on Romeo and Juliet. Others are doing the works of Shakespeare, and they are forming a company around producing the works of Shakespeare. So the Works of Shakespeare Company could be a fiscally sponsored project. So it's really up to you to define how you want to structure your project. It could be for myself as a photographer, it could be that I'm going to be working on a book of landscape and portrait photography, and I'm going to be having an exhibition. And I'm going to call my project Diane DiBasella Projects. It's going to be broad and sort of ongoing. Or it could be very specifically, I'm going to write a book. This is the name of the book, and this is what I want sponsorship for. So I typically encourage people to try to think broadly and ongoing about how they define that project so you can remain sponsored and you can continue to fundraise for it. The deadline, as I mentioned, is the last day of each month. So if you apply by March 31st, you could be approved no later than April 15th. And that happens each month. So if you miss it this month, you can do it again next month. So I just wanted to briefly talk about fundraising before Teresa jumps over to the crowdfunding side. So in terms of fundraising in general, the Foundation Center is obviously a great resource to go to for finding grants and learning about how to write proposals, how to research ones that are a good fit for you. But we really try to make sure that you understand that fundraising is about relationships, and it's all about that connection that you have to your audience and your community, and to actually really maintain and foster that. You're not asking them just to give to you, you're asking them to become part of the work that you're producing and to become part of a movement towards producing that work. So you are offering them a solution to some sort of problem or some sort of thing that you want them to be part of that end goal. At Fractured Atlas, we have over the years looked at where money comes from, because we're curious when people are thinking about their budget, and they're thinking about how do I actually raise money and where should I spend most of my time. I wish I had a more recent slide, but in 2013, our fiscally sponsored project raised 58% of their contributed revenue from individual donors. So this is friends and family. This is individuals that are coming to see your work and care about it. These are a community that you're building, and you're constantly thinking about how they can connect with you and become part of the work that you're doing. 34% came from foundation support. So that's grant makers, that is private foundations, and 5% came from corporate support. So that's things like matching gifts. So if, let's say, my Aunt Sarah writes a check to Fractured Atlas for my fiscally sponsored project for $500, she's donating $500 to my project. Yes. And I then find out that my Aunt Sarah works at Time Warner, and Time Warner offers to match her gift to my project, and they also give $500. So that's one type of corporate support. There's also other corporate support out there that is, if you go to a local business and they offer to cut a check for an event that you're having or something like that. And then government support is only 1% down here. So when you look at something like this, why do I show this to people? I want you to think about where you want to spend your time and how you actually, when you're thinking about how much money you need, where it's going to come from. This should not represent 100% of your budget, because you should also have earned revenue. You should have sources that you are selling something, that you are either, having some sort of ticket sales, that you're selling a print, that you are maybe offering a workshop. But think about creative ways to actually engage your audience to actually buy something that you're producing. It's important because your revenue stream is not going to be totally contributed, and you do have to have sources that are not just related to people giving money to you without any expectation of a return. So Fractured Atlas helps in a number of different ways when we are working with you on fundraising. One of the things that we do, as I mentioned earlier, is we ask you to send us all of your materials before you send them out to your potential funders. And when you do that, we're looking at those materials not only to have a copy of them in case we're contacted by the funders, but also to give you feedback on them. So if you write an individual appeal letter and send it to us, we're going to tell you you spelled 3 words wrong, it's 3 pages too long, and we're not sure where your ask is. You need to ask for money. In the first paragraph, you need to say to somebody, I am trying to raise $10,000 for this project. Will you contribute $50 to my project? We try to coach you to make sure that you understand what makes a good appeal letter and how to actually get to the point where people understand you're asking them for money. We see a lot of asks where the ask is buried and it's never directly said that you're actually trying to get them to give money. Asking for money is hard. It's not that easy to come out there and say, will you donate to my project? But we try to teach that it's very common in the United States for people to ask each other for money. It is very normal, and if you present it in a way that is like any charity sending out a solicitation letter, they're going to get it and know what it is, and if they believe in the work and want to give to it, then they're going to give. So we do the same thing with your grant proposals. Anytime you write a grant proposal, you will send it to us, and we will review it and give you feedback on it. We don't copy edit, but we will say to you, you did not answer the question that the foundation asked, or your narrative paragraph or 3 pages is too long, or we're not entirely clear on what the work is. So you have that feedback from us before it goes to the foundation. And we do the same thing with your crowdfunding campaigns as well. When you build a crowdfunding campaign, we'll look at it, we'll read through the description, we'll watch the video, we'll go over your perks with you. So we're always trying to help you improve the materials that you're sending out. We'll also do the same thing with your website. So if you are putting a donation page on your website, we'll take a look at it and offer guidance on how to make it clear that you're asking for donations. At Fractured Atlas, we also offer one-on-one consultations. So at any point, you can set up a phone call with us to actually sit down and talk about your fundraising strategy. And it's somewhat self-directed. We ask you to come to us and tell us what you need help with, but we'll help you think about a plan for the next year, about what you want to do and when you want to do it and how to do it. Lastly, I will say that there are a lot of great resources out there for fundraising, like the Foundation Center. So, when people are looking for grants, well, we can talk to you about, what makes you a good fit for a grant and how to identify those grants. Ultimately, the Foundation Center is where we're going to say go to look. So this is definitely the best resource out there for searching for grants. But we're happy to talk with you about the sort of process of identifying them and really thinking about what makes it a good fit. Because you could come here and you could probably pull a list of 100 grants, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 100 of those grants are actually a good fit for what you're doing. So that's the sort of general overview of fiscal sponsorship. I know some of you had your hands raised, so I'm going to pause here to let people ask questions about fiscal sponsorship before Teresa takes over. Yes.
I had a question about for the ticket sales that are through Artfully and any Indiegogo campaign contributions. Is there like a minimum for it to become tax deductible, or is that just for tracking purposes?
So the question is, if through Indiegogo or through Artfully, if there is a minimum for tax purposes for the person to be able to take a deduction?
No. So you know how you can track ticket sales in conjunction with MailChimp and Indiegogo contributions? Say you're selling tickets on Artfully, are those tax deductible sales?
Okay.
Or are they not? And then for Indiegogo, if it's being filtered through Indiegogo, is there a minimum donation before it can be a tax deduction for my donor?
Okay. Two different questions. One is, can ticket sales on Artfully be tax deductible?
Mm-hmm.
The answer to that is they cannot unless they are partially deductible.
Mm-hmm.
So and for those of you that don't know what partial deductibility means, let's say that you are selling tickets to a show that the fair market value of those tickets is $10. So you're saying that each seat is valued at $10, but you decide to actually sell the tickets for $50. That means that the person buying that ticket for $50 could take a $40 tax deduction because they're getting a fair market value of a $10 ticket in exchange. That's partial deductibility. The second question was, through Indiegogo, is there a minimum amount that a donor can make to receive a tax deduction? I'm sorry, that one's...
No, I know. That a donor needs to make, because I know on Indiegogo there's like, the new $5 donation if you want to.
Right. If there's a minimum amount that they need to make to receive a tax write-off. Tax deductibility is based on each individual donor's unique tax situation. So if somebody gives $5, getting a tax receipt for $5 might not matter, most likely doesn't matter, unless they're giving $5,005 donations. And it also depends on their tax bracket. For a lot of people, they take the standard deduction, so making a $5 tax write-off isn't going to help them. For others that itemize every single thing, you never know. So they can it doesn't matter to us. We issue a tax receipt for every single donation that's made through our fiscal sponsorship program, regardless of the amount. And then it's up to the donor to decide if they actually want to take that deduction or not.
So in terms of the criteria for public benefit, so if someone's a sculptor and they're going to sell their sculptures, is there a public benefit? I mean, if they have obviously they could have an exhibition, but is there ever a situation where that's not a public benefit?
Sure. So the question is, as a sculptor, if you were selling your sculptures and there's no sort of exhibition or anything, and the only thing that you're doing is selling them to individuals, is that technically considered a public benefit? The answer to that is, I don't have an exact answer because it would be based on facts and circumstances around your specific project. So what we would look at is the person that is buying this sculpture, taking it and putting it in their home and no one else ever gets to see it? Or are they taking it and they're having, a certain amount of people seeing it through their home, or they're lending it to museums, or they are whatever they're doing with the X, Y, and Z. Our board of directors would look at your application for fiscal sponsorship and probably come back to you and ask things like that. It depends also on, is this for producing one piece that you're selling to one person, or is this you're producing a collection of sculptures that you're selling to a wide range of people. How are you selling them? How are you showing them through the sales? Public benefit can be defined in different ways, because if you have a website that is publicly accessible to anybody to go and view them, that could be considered potentially a public benefit.
So if you had like half, 50%, putting in their house, and then some percent out there in the world, that's probably going to make the criteria.
It probably will,
Okay,
yes,
thank
if you have half going to your private audience and half going out to the public.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yes.
Okay, my question is, it's kind of two parts, okay? Be quick about it. One question is, she talked about sculpture, but let's just talk about painting in general, art, So maybe you're a painter, you're a landscape artist, you're painting or painting watercolor, whatever. And you want to have like an exhibition, maybe set it up somewhere, where maybe not at a gallery, but maybe you have to rent space, rent like some school or something like that. So you make an application and so on. And again, I understand the concept about public benefit. It isn't just someone buying it, hanging it, and someone doing it publicly. Maybe companies buying it for their lobby or something, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is, so you as an artist, you go through all that effort, rent some space at some building, maybe it's some school or something like that, and you get the fiscal sponsorship, to set it up and things like that. But let's face it, you got your pictures out, people have come, but you've made no sale. So essentially, you've spent all that money, and I'm just giving this as a hypothetical example. So you spent all that money, people have given you money to rent space and put out brochures and put out flyers, but it's been a total loss. You made no income, you spent a lot of time, and that's it. I mean, is that how it works? Like you got to be able to have a ticketed event where you sell things.
I mean, it depends. Everybody is doing different things.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that is what they want to do. They want to have an exhibition of their work and they want people to see it, and they will raise money to have that as the ultimate end goal.
Oh.
There are people that are specifically trying to sell their work through the same method, and some do and some don't. I mean, I can't tell you that there's every single story ends in this amazing sales and you make a lot of money. That is what we want for you, but it's not always the case. You have to work hard, and your work has to be something that people want to buy. So, that's ultimately up to you as the artist to figure that part out. You have to think about, I think about filmmakers. We have a lot of filmmakers that use fiscal sponsorship, and they're making short films, they're making documentaries, they're making things that there might not be a huge audience that gets to see this, and there might not be anybody who ultimately buys it in the end. But they're making it because they believe in this work that they're producing, and they want to get the message out there that they're trying to get out. So that's a question about your own artistic practice and what the value is for you and for your audience.
I see what you're saying. So, basically, if you do not sell your product, you made nothing.
I mean, you can pay yourself through the fiscal sponsorship program. So if you raise money, let's say you raise $50,000 through the fiscal sponsorship program for this exhibition, and the exhibition, actually all the materials, the rent, all of that stuff, only costs $30,000, and you spend 4 months working on your paintings, I would encourage you to pay yourself a $20,000 salary for those 4 months. That is definitely something that a lot of our projects do, is they pay themselves, they pay the artists that they're working with, and we typically try to encourage you to include that in your budget, because everybody should be getting paid. You shouldn't be working for free.
So, in fact, that can actually be considered almost an educational thing. The artist isn't just having an exhibition, but is also showing how he or she does a painting. So, in a sense, if he or she pays himself, he is also providing some education, art education to the community.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it can be, construed in that fashion and even done that way. Now, second question related would be, I worked in the literary arts, translations, creative writing, and so on, and I also do storytelling, performing. So, is that also considered under the arts?
Definitely.
Okay.
The question was, is storytelling and literary arts considered under the arts? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
No,
repeating so the people online can hear.
That's all I wanted to find.
Okay. Yes.
Speaking of filmmakers, I'm a filmmaker, but I'm working on a feature that might get distribution ultimately. So am I still qualified to get fiscal sponsorship for production?
Sure, that's a great question. The question was, as a filmmaker, if you are planning on getting a distributor down the road, can you use fiscal sponsorship for producing the work? You absolutely can. The way that our fiscal sponsorship agreement is structured is that you can fundraise for your project, for the creation of the work, and if you at some point either have investors, so an investor is somebody who is going to own the work, who is going to want some sort of return on the money that they give you, or if you have a distributor who is going to purchase it and distribute it and they hope to make a profit off of it. The only thing that we ask is you sign an addendum to our fiscal sponsorship agreement that lays out certain terms about your distribution. So the terms are basically that we want to see a copy of the distribution agreement before you enter into it, and that ultimately the purpose of the work, the most important purpose of the work is for people to see it. That the ultimate purpose is not for people to make a profit off of it. So that is what we're looking for, is that the distribution, hopefully, is going to mean that more eyes get to see and more people get to experience it, rather than it just the distribution being about the stakeholders who are going to own it.
Does that mean that an ROI needs to be adjusted for the stakeholders so that it reflects that we're just looking for audience?
No. I mean, what we do is our board reviews these distribution agreements. And what we're just really looking for is them outlining how they're going to get it into an audience. So we want to make sure that they're not just like buying it and saying, this is the market and these are the financial mechanisms that are going to actually enable us to make money. We want to hear their plan for how they're going to actually distribute it and how it's going to be seen by others.
Strategy.
Yeah. We haven't had any situations where distribution agreements have been problematic. And we also, you also have the opportunity to end the fiscal sponsorship relationship at any point. So if we got to a point where you were signing a distribution deal and we looked at it and we were like, we can't work with this, we would ask you to spend down any money that you had remaining in your fiscal sponsorship before you signed it. And then you would leave the program. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned the earned income versus contributed. And do you have an amount you're looking for, or you just want organizations to have earned income?
Yeah, there is some data from, I can't remember the name of the organization, but they collected data on nonprofit arts organizations in the United States, and they looked at where their income comes from. And it was, I believe it's around like 54% of your budget comes from contributed income, and the other 46% comes from earned revenue. So it's around there. There's no hard and fast rule to say that's exactly like what the percentages need to be.
So you don't require it.
We don't require it. No, I mean, it's just something we recommend. Foundations, when they're granting money to you, will want to see that you have other sources of income besides them. So it's great to have an earned income line on your budget to be able to show them I'm actually selling stuff.
Thank you.
No problem.
So, do you ever work with 501c3s?
That's a great question. The question is, do we ever work with 501c3s? We do work with 501c3 organizations. They typically don't need fiscal sponsorship. I mean, you have your own status, so you can do all of this independent of us. But we have a lot of 501c3s that use Artfully to manage their patrons and for donation processing and for being able to sell tickets. And we are in the process right now of expanding our fiscal sponsorship program. So in the fall this year, we will have more offerings for 501c3s to help them with fundraising. So you should check back. We're hoping to launch it in like September or October, but there'll be more information on our website then.
You have so many resources, and I'm like the smallest 501c3 in the world, but you have so many resources that I would happily, work with you because you have all the things that I don't have.
We can fiscally sponsor a 501c3 if you wanted that.
Yeah.
It's not like the traditional method, but But it wouldn't hurt if you wanted all access to all of those services at this point in time.
Yeah.
In terms of like the fundraising assistance,
Yeah.
that you would need to be fiscally sponsored to access that.
Yeah.
But like I said, in the fall there will be more opportunities. We also, the last thing I just want to mention, we offer webinars. Each week we offer a webinar on different topics. They're usually on Tuesday evenings, or actually they're Tuesday evenings in New York, but Tuesday afternoons here. They're at 4:30 on Tuesdays. And they are recorded and they're available on our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you can't actually participate live, but they go into more detail about some of the things I sort of touched upon. So we talk about, we have a webinar on individual donors, we have a webinar on grants, we have a webinar on budgeting, we have a webinar on corporate funding, we have a webinar on government grants, we have an orientation to our fiscal sponsorship program. So these are all free, and anybody can check them out at any time.
And we can look at the YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, it's on our YouTube
And
channel.
what is the website?
Fracturedatlas.org.
All we have to do is look at.
Yeah.
One last question.
Okay.
If you're an independent producer who does like theater and film and whatever else, you had mentioned something about starting a fiscal sponsorship that's like an ongoing or a seasonal sort of sponsorship, so that it's the longevity of the company versus one project. Does that mean that you can be fundraising for an underlying mission statement of the company versus projects?
Yeah, so the question, that's a great question. The question is, if you are using fiscal sponsorship, can you fundraise for sort of the mission statement of an organization rather than for individual projects? Absolutely. I mean, we typically recommend that people think of their project description as a mission statement. So, who is your audience? What are you producing? What are your long-term goals? That kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be super long or super detailed. We just want a general sense of what you're trying to accomplish. Yes.
Are there any projects where people are working with like the tech industry or NASA or something like that? So I know, like with NASA, there are some are some programs and projects that they do that you can you need to be have nonprofit status in order to work with them. It's some of the STEM programs.
Okay.
But so I guess in that case it would be like, is it possible to have fiscal sponsorship, not necessarily for funding, but in order to be a part of a program with either government or industry, a commercial entity?
Sure. So the question is it possible to use fiscal sponsorship outside of the fundraising tools in order to enter into partnerships with entities that require that you're a nonprofit? I want to say yes, but it depends on what their requirements are. So my assumption is that NASA would probably want to work directly with a 501c3, and I don't know if you would be qualified through the fiscal sponsorship program to do it. We would be open to that, like you don't need to fundraise. So we have some projects that use us solely because they want to get nonprofit rates. We have a couple of resources in New York City that are things like, there's something called Materials for the Arts in New York City that's like this warehouse of donated stuff that only nonprofits can go and they can take it. So a lot of people get fiscal sponsorship just so they can go to Materials for the Arts. So there are situations where it's completely okay and we don't mind confirming that you're eligible for this type of stuff, but it just depends on whether or not they accept it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to projects?
A fund is
For say I came as an organization, but I had like 6 projects that I was trying to seek funding for, but
Okay.
under the umbrella of the single organization.
Right. So the question is there a limit to the number of projects that you can sort of frame within your fiscal sponsorship project description?
Right.
There is not a limit. So, we have projects that come and they say, I'm Diane DiBasella Projects, and then they list like 10 different things that they're doing within their project description, and that's okay. I would encourage you to think not so much specifically about each one of those projects, but sort of in general, like what is your goal with those projects, and trying to describe them collectively rather than individually, because that way if they change, if one gets canceled, if one morphs into something else, you've made it so it's a much broader description rather than identifying each of these like really unique activities that might not still happen, the next year or something like that.
One other real quick, especially like people working with tech industry or something like that, is there any protections on people's projects, like legally? So say an artist has a great idea and they want to work with a tech company on it, and they're completely open about the every detail, and then the tech company just goes does it, and
So
any protection?
So the question is there any protection if you are working with, let's say, a tech company that tries to steal your idea? Does fiscal sponsorship protect you in any way? Unfortunately, it does not. This is a matter of copyright and trademark and things that I am not super familiar with. But we do have legal resources that we refer people to. So, in a situation like that, I would definitely recommend, before you share too much of your ideas or enter into any agreements, that you make sure that your ideas are protected ahead of time.
You write a contract with them, and they will make sure that there is you just cannot go to a corporation or a tech company without having some sort of an agreement. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, having an agreement beforehand is the best bet to make sure that your ideas and your assets are protected. Is there any other questions? All right, well, Teresa is going to jump up and talk about crowdfunding a little bit, but there's one more question.
My last question was, what if, for example, you did something jointly with another group, but that group is non-profit that helps the community, maybe with, say, literacy or something like that, where there is, more eyes are seeing it, but there is also the public benefit that maybe you're helping a low-income community or something like that.
So your question, I'm not sure what your question is actually. Is that eligible for fiscal sponsorship?
Yeah, meaning what, can you do a project where, jointly with another entity where, maybe storytelling for lower income children or something like that?
Definitely. So the question was, can you use fiscal sponsorship to partner with another organization to work with them? Absolutely.
But that may be a non-profit organization.
Yeah, with a non-profit organization. I mean, we have a lot of teaching artists that get fiscal sponsorship and that are doing things like within the school systems.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a lot of examples of that existing already within our program.
Great.
Yeah.
And we can look into that and find out about it on your website.
Specifically about those
This
projects.
teaching,
You can search for all of our projects on our website. They are listed by artistic discipline.
Okay.
So there's not a search functionality for teaching artists, but it's done more by like visual art, dance, performing arts.
But they're doing it. These artists are teaching artists at schools and stuff
Yes,
like that.
yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for listening to me talk about fiscal sponsorship. I'm going to head out to drive to Los Angeles. So,
6 hours.
yeah, that's why I was like, if I can hit the road before 5, hopefully I'll miss the traffic. All right.
Good luck on your ride.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye, everybody online. Bye, Natasha.
All right, how's everybody doing? Do we need to do a shakeout or anything? Are we ready to power through? Good? Do you need for me to answer that question that came in online?
Yes.
Okay. So we do have another question from our virtual audience. Okay. It's asking if we have experience or advice on applying to fellowships.
And I got a follow-up from her. She says, more as a journalist or photographer focused on social issues, is it better to find fiscal sponsorship over fellowship?
Oh, sure. And then as a, what were the disciplines again?
Journalist or photographer
Journalist.
focused on social issues.
Or photographer focused on social issues if fiscal sponsorship is a good alternative to fellowships. I think they kind of work together actually, because of course you get a lot of training at a fellowship that could that we're not doing with you, because of course in fellowships you tend to work with your peers. Whereas with fiscal sponsorship, we're very much advising you about just the fundraising aspect of it. So I think you can benefit from doing both types of programs, both types of professional development opportunities. So I don't think, we don't have fellowship advice specifically outside of what we would say for positioning yourself for a grant, but we do list fellowships. We put out a blog post usually every month with upcoming deadlines and for grants, and sometimes fellowships fall under that category too. So something that you can look at there.
Benefit is a career move.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to talk about crowdfunding. I'm going to introduce myself again. I'm Teresa Hubbard, and I'm the program specialist for fiscal sponsorship at Fractured Atlas. The reason we feel comfortable and we talk about crowdfunding a lot comes out of our experience not only fundraising, but advising our projects about their Indiegogo campaigns that they're running. So we've done a lot of research, and we've given a lot of advice and learned a lot from our projects and we're here to sort of share that information with you so that you can really create a crowdfunding campaign that is successful and it puts you in a good place to actually reach your goal. So what is it? Here's a Wikipedia definition if you want to read it. But essentially it gives a lot of people the opportunity to make small gifts in a community setting. Provides transparency because you can often see who else has contributed, and that smaller gift might make a big impact, and you can actually see that in the campaign. So why do we use it? Like I mentioned, smaller donations. Crowdfunding became an option around 2008, 2009, and it sort of came out of the economic downturn when people didn't feel like they could give large donations, even if they were getting a tax deduction for it. So these platforms arose out of that, and they made it possible for you to feel comfortable giving small donations in a community setting, which was really beneficial, and I think that's why it's grown so much in the past 7-8 years, because people caught on to this idea of giving in a community setting. It also integrates with email and social media very well, and so as technology has advanced in the past many years, these platforms were really created to integrate with them so that you can disseminate information in a more accessible way. I know you have a question. I'm going to, these slides go pretty quickly, so I'll leave time for questions at the end. And then again, I mentioned this idea of transparency. You can often see who's contributed, how much they've contributed, and you can see what kinds of perks they're claiming, and it makes everything more. I can't think of a better word than transparent. All of the information is there. You have all the information you need, and you can see who else is given. But really, it's a way for one person or a small group of people to make a big impact, because you have this opportunity to share one page with a ton of people through your social media and through your email. Not to mention, while it's a little bit rare, but people see these websites. It's a piece of marketing collateral, so it could just be out there in the world, and people might see it and catch an interest in your work. There are two pretty big players right now, Indiegogo and Kickstarter. I'm sure, has everybody heard of both of these? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they have subtle differences, but ultimately they are doing well because of the number of successful campaigns on their site. So this is what Indiegogo looks like. Very much, you'll see the same thing on Kickstarter. There's a video, there's always a goal, there's an amount of time, and often you see these perks or donor benefits, very similar to giving levels that you would see at a nonprofit. So these are all there, as well as a story, where you're going to tell a very compelling story about the work that you're creating and give them a good reason to contribute. And then, of course, you also see a contribute button. So Indiegogo was founded in 2008 by 3 different people who basically decided that there's a lot of people in this world and they should have the opportunity to get that work funded. A lot of these people had big dreams, and therefore Indiegogo is very open to the types of projects that fundraise on their site. They often do not have requirements in place, and they've even opened a separate site that is only for raising funds for life events. You know, those are the people who are raising funds for medical costs, or for taking a trip across the country so that they can pay for gas. You know, there are all these life things that they're raising funds for, because Indiegogo wanted to give them the opportunity to have a platform that wasn't muddled by all these other programs. And then there's Kickstarter. You can see the same thing, a video, you have the giving levels, you have a goal and the amount of time that's left. Kickstarter has really sort of revolutionized crowdfunding. You know, they started in they originally actually started in 2002, and they had investors working in their, that were looking to back the platform, but the investors fell through. So they actually crowdfunded to pay for Kickstarter, and a lot of the advice and everything that they're giving comes out of that experience of actually needing to crowdfund for this work. They have a very strong brand, and they are very dedicated to this all or nothing model, where it's also called fixed funding, where you have to actually reach your goal before they'll give you any of the money, or before they even charge your donors' credit cards. So there's sort of a strategy there in deciding how much you're going to ask for, and how much you're going to ask for, and also whether or not you even use that type of model. You know, that's all Kickstarter does, whereas on Indiegogo you could do that, or flexible funding, which allows you to get all the funds regardless of whether or not you meet your goal. So you're probably wondering, which one do I use? And a lot of the differences that I just outlined are broken down here, whether or not they accept all projects or if they have criteria. Online support. Both of these platforms have amazing resources for education. How to set up your campaign, what the best types of, what the best techniques are strategy-wise in actually getting your campaign seen, those sorts of things. They have really awesome resources there. And then there's the all or nothing model. They both really integrate very well with social media, and they have fees in place. This, I actually think Indiegogo just launched new fees, so it's a little bit out of date. I think it's now down to about 5%. And what they do, though, is they always pass along the credit card fees. So even though Kickstarter's fee is 5%, with the credit card processing fees, it ends up being a little bit closer to 8 to 10%. And the same thing with Indiegogo. It just increases the fee a little bit. And then they use different payment administrators, including PayPal in many cases. And of course, there's the Fractured Atlas partnership, which we mentioned before. Is it easier to see? Yeah. So when you think about which platform to use, it's really best to think about your audience. You want to use the platform that they'll respond to. And maybe that's also on par with your brand, because that's what your audience is familiar with already. So one of my colleagues likes to use an analogy that's really pretty fun that I'd share with everybody. Imagine that you're throwing a party, and I'm going to use California as an example because I can do that. Let's say you're throwing a party and you are in the Bay Area, but all of your friends are in LA. Are you really going to throw a party in the Bay Area when you know that your friends may not make that trek? Isn't it easier for you to go to them? So that's the idea with crowdfunding. You want to pick the platform that your audience will go to. And it's also fun like a party. So now we're going to talk a bit about strategy and putting your campaign together and creating it. Time is going to be your most valuable asset. You want to allow yourself several weeks, if not months, to plan your campaign. Your campaign should be project-based, which means you should have an exhibit, a performance, or a finished product like a film at the end of it. Something that you can say you will have, something tangible that comes out of your campaign that you can then show to your audience and all of the people who gave. So once you have what kind of project you have in mind, you want to think about your budget. Your budget should be realistic and reasonable. You really want to think about your expenses, the hard costs that you're going to have, and maybe allow an extra 10%. That makes total sense. But you should also make sure to allow for fundraising expenses. You see these days a request to add more money for shipping costs, which is actually in the fundraising world is a little bit tacky. So this is a plea for all of you to think about incorporating shipping costs into your budget and into your goals so that you don't have to pass that along to your donors or to these people that you're asking to contribute to your work. You pay for shipping when you buy something, but if you're actually giving a donation, you don't expect, and maybe you're getting something in exchange, you don't expect to pay for shipping because that's a gift. So allow for that in your goal as well as in your budget for your campaign and for your project. So of course, I mentioned the goal. Once you have your budget, you can create a goal, and your goal should be based on what you need for your project and to fulfill your perks or giving levels. So here are a few facts. The average donation on a crowdfunding campaign is around $75 to $80. But the most common donation amount and the most common perk claimed is in the $20 to $25 range. Now, the difference comes from those one or two higher donations that you're going to get. That brings that $20 to $25 average up. And that's why the average donation is a little bit higher. But you really want to make sure that when you're planning out your campaign, you are including incentives for these people who are contributing in the $20 to $25 range, because those are the most common ones you're going to have. It's what most people are expecting to give when they come to your campaign. Goals should also be based on the size of your network. 30% of your goal, the sort of rule of thumb is that 30% of your goal will be contributed by family and friends, and you should have that in place before you even start the campaign. So when you think about it, let's say you have a $7,500 goal, and you divide that by the $75 average contribution. That's 100 contributors for your campaign in order to meet your goal. And that means you should have 33 people lined up to give right at the beginning of your campaign. 33 people, probably pretty doable between family and friends. You can often find that, especially if you have an established audience already. But let's think about inflating it. Maybe your actual total project budget is much larger. Maybe it's $75,000. So if you divide that by the $75 contribution, of course that's 1,000 contributors, which means that you have to have 333 people ready to give before the campaign even starts. That's a lot. That's a lot for a lot of people that to have in place. Of course, there are techniques, building your team, making pasta salad for some reason, or macaroni and cheese or whatever it was, but it is a lot. And so this is something that you have to think about. How many people do you know? How many people will give on that first day when you're trying to figure out what your goal is? If you do have a larger budget, you can break it up into several different fundraising initiatives. You don't have to use crowdfunding for all of them. Maybe you use it for one or two of them, but that's sort of the strategy in order to raise your total budget over time. You want to break it down into smaller bites. A good example of that is for film. If you separate it into the different phases, you have pre-production and production and post-production, you can make a campaign for each of those. Of course, you don't want to do them right on top of each other because your donors will wonder why you're fundraising again right away. But if you fundraise for pre-production and production even, and then you have something to show them afterwards, they're going to feel more compelled to give later on because they can see that you've done what you said you were going to do. So you can think strategically about it as well in terms of breaking up your budget and figuring out your goal. So there's also what Indiegogo calls the green bar effect. And that essentially says that the higher goal doesn't always mean that you're going to get more money. So I know it's kind of hard to read these, but each of these campaigns has raised $20,000. And they both have 23 days left, but the one on my right has a $150,000 goal, and the one on the left here, or I guess as you're looking at it, the right, is a $50,000 goal. When somebody looks at this, they're more likely to give to the $50,000 goal because they can see that their donation will have a bigger impact. There's also more trust in this because they have no idea if that other campaign is going to actually reach its goal. And so they don't know if the project is going to happen. So having a more reasonable goal puts a lot of trust in your contributors, because then they believe that you can actually do the project that you say that you're going to do. Plan ahead. I know I mentioned that before, but definitely keep planning ahead. And now we can think about your timeline after we've set your goal. So, some strategies again. Your campaign should be 30 to 45 days long. That is typically the best time, or the best amount of time that you can give your campaign. And the reason for it is a campaign actually typically moves in a U pattern. It starts pretty high at the top. You're going to have a lot of volume at the beginning because you've been promoting it. People are expecting it to launch. Then it's going to dip. It's going to dip for 1 to 2 weeks. You'll get some donations, of course, but a lot of that is going to be dependent on you driving traffic to it. Whereas other people will wait until the end to contribute to see if you're even close to your goal. So that's when the U comes back up. People see that you're closing in on your goal, and they're going to help you cross that finish line in that last week. So you want to make sure that your campaign isn't much longer than 45 days, because then that lag in the middle becomes so much longer, and it's harder to drive traffic back to the campaign. It's always best to launch on a Monday or Tuesday. So studies have shown that people are more likely to give when they are sitting at their desk at work. Of course, that is not always, I know, it's the most productive use of your time. And it also doesn't include, communities that may not have a desk job, but what they have found is that the people who are giving are typically doing it when they're at their desk. And so to maximize on that behavior, you want to launch on a Monday or Tuesday, because that maximizes the amount of time that those people are sitting behind their computers at work. You don't, however, want to launch on a Monday holiday, because you want to drive traffic to that campaign on that first day. So avoid Memorial Day, avoid Labor Day, avoid the President's Day. You don't necessarily want to launch on a Monday just because it's a Monday if people aren't going to be at work. So it is, to clarify this a little bit more, it is always a good idea to fundraise at the holidays, toward the end of the year, because people are trying to get their tax deduction. People are in the spirit of giving. A lot of companies raise a lot of their budget around the holidays, so you can definitely use that as a strategy. But Monday holidays are specifically what this is saying. And even so, you don't want to launch your campaign on Christmas, because again, no one is at their desk. It's very important not to rush creating or launching your campaign. The preparation should start weeks, if not months in advance, so that you have time to build your audience. You want to make sure that you want to start talking about your campaign before it even starts, so that you can get that 30% in place from the beginning. So in order, of course, to generate that interest. So make sure that your address book is up to date. You want to have people's phone numbers. You want to have their email addresses. And then you want to also make sure that you've built up your social media network. Make sure you have followers. Make sure that you're following other people, which is huge. So I think there's this pretty common idea in the arts that if I'm a theater company and there's another theater company right next door, that we're competitors. But really, you're all in this together, right? We're all trying to make art, and we're all trying to make the world a better place through our art. So why not become allies? Why not become partners in the work that you're doing, especially if you're serving the same audience? And this translates directly to social media. You can follow their page. They can follow yours. If you start reposting some of their posts, they'll do the same to you. So you start, all of a sudden, you've increased your audience by basically double, because you are including all of their audience members as well. And so you have the potential to really grow your audience and your social media following just by doing that. Another great way is to reach out to bloggers and see if you can do a guest blog, or if they want to blog about you, if you are in their sort of the realm of what they write about. So the next piece, that's sort of the planning and the preparation piece. Now we're going to start about actually building your campaign. So I know if you're not a filmmaker, putting together a pitch video seems a little bit daunting, but it is one of the most important pieces of a crowdfunding campaign. Kickstarter has found that 50% of campaigns with a video reach their goal, while campaigns without a video only have about a 30% chance of being funded. So you want to make sure that you're really doing this because it's what people expect.
Can you tell me what should be the length of the video? Because
I'll get to that on this slide. So you're going to want to keep it personal. John Trigonis is a filmmaker who wrote a great book called Crowdfunding for Filmmakers, but it's not just for filmmakers, it's for everybody. And he pointed out that people give to people. And that's true in nonprofit fundraising, it's true in crowdfunding. You want to make sure that you are showing your personality and connecting to your audience on a human level so that they feel connected to your work. You want to get to the point. So the drop-off rate is 30 seconds. So people will watch your video for 30 seconds and then decide if they want to watch the rest of it. And so you want to make sure that you are getting to your point in that first 30 seconds. You are telling them that you're raising funds, and it's great to include your goal in that sentence as well, and a brief summary of what you're actually raising the funds for in that 30 seconds. Of course, you'll expand. You want to make it professional. People will, if your campaign video is a little bit too silly, they might question whether or not you are serious about the work and whether or not you are serious about completing the work. So, it's another point of trust for your donors. You want to showcase the work. Of course, you might be creating something new, but if you've created art in the past, you can showcase that work. Talk about your process. Talk about what you've done to plan this work that you're now fundraising for. All of these things will give your donor a taste of what it is that you are trying to do. And again, it builds trust because they know that you have a success rate of actually creating art in the past. Keep it short. Should not be longer than 2 to 3 minutes at all, because people, again, will stop watching. So get to the point in the first 30 seconds, and then overall, keep it short. But have fun. This is not stodgy, old-fashioned nonprofit fundraising. This is a more fun tool that you can use to supplement your budget. So have fun, be personable, and people will attach themselves, they'll be attracted to you and the work that you're doing. So you also want to reward your donors for your success. We found that, or I think Indiegogo found that campaigns offering perks raise 143% more than those that don't. This is one of the instrumental pieces of crowdfunding. It's what sets crowdfunding apart, so you want to make sure that you have donor benefits and rewards built in. So when you're thinking about your rewards, you want to make sure that they're affordable. You should not break the bank with your rewards. And they should also make sense for the amount that's donated. If you are offering some sort of high value, maybe a dinner with the project director, you don't want to give it at the $10 level, because if a lot of people are giving $10, then you're going to be going on a lot of dinners. So make sure that it makes sense for the amount of time and resources that you have available and that you can use. So there are different kinds of rewards that you can offer. One is information, adding people to your mailing list or signing them up for your newsletter, those sorts of things, and also just keeping them updated on the work, which you're going to want to do anyway. There is the option to do products, but again, this is one of those places where you can spend too money really easily. So if you're not creating a project or a product, I would encourage you to consider not offering products in exchange, because if you're not already putting your work toward that or your time toward that, you're just going to waste time and money offering these products. Swag, on the other hand, is great. If you're doing a tote bag, because that means that if your donor is carrying around a tote bag with pride because they love your project, how many other eyes are seeing that? I mean, just think on public transportation. How many people are you seeing on an everyday basis? And you may not register necessarily what they're wearing, but if you see a logo, that might catch your eye. So think about that a little bit too. Experiences. I mentioned the dinner. That's great, but also it's really a good idea to engage your donor in something that they're going to feel appreciated, that will make them feel appreciated. So invite them to your rehearsals, invite them to a day on set, invite them to have a Skype or in-person meeting with you so that they can learn a little bit more about the process and about your art making. All of these things are experiences that will help them feel engaged in your work. And then of course you can do something personal. That falls into the experience realm. You want something that gives them face-to-face contact with you so that they feel important. So there's also the written pitch. Written pitches will expand on what you put in your video. So people are more likely to watch the video, but they look to the written story for extra information. So you want to tell your audience, you want to keep it compelling and you want to tell them a story. You should use images and video content if the platform allows it. Offer photos, work samples. We actually ran a campaign at Fractured Atlas a few months ago, and I had the inventor put all of his sketches for the thing that we're creating in the campaign so that there was evidence of this really creative process so that people could feel more engaged in that and feel compelled to give. You should also make sure to build a team. You know how many people you have in your social networks and especially online, but think about how many people you could potentially reach if you have 5 team members, because all of them have their own social networks. So if you build a team and everybody puts in effort, they share the work, they email people, you've potentially expanded your audience 5-fold. You want to definitely provide links to your social media and website. So if anybody, regardless of where you get your information, what's the first thing you do to learn more? You probably Google it, right? You're probably looking for a website where you can learn more information. Take that step out for your donors and just give them your website so that they can learn more information. And make sure your website is up to date so that the information so that they're not learning something on your website that isn't necessarily true, and you want to make sure that it reflects the campaign. So now it's time to launch. So Indiegogo also found that contributors who visit a campaign page from a link in an email tend to give 20% more than if they click from any other source. So you can use that to your advantage. Make sure to email people. Don't just use social media to disseminate your campaign, but use social media definitely to get the word out about your campaign. Because if I donate to a campaign, I'm going to share that on social media, and hopefully one person in my entire network sees it, clicks on it, and then gives. So not only are you tapping into the social media networks of your teammates, but potentially all of your donors too. And if somebody can't give, ask them to share. What harm is that if they want to give and they just don't have the means to? Why not share it on their social media to expand your audience?
Where was your stat from? The email link?
It was from Indiegogo.
Indiegogo.
Yep.
And you said it was 30 or 20% more?
20% more.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Another strategy to drive traffic during your campaign, I talked about that 2-week lull or so in the middle, is to post new perks and add updates, especially limited edition ones. You want people to be racing to your campaign. If they see, there are only 2 of these really high value or interesting things that I'm offering, they need to beat everybody else to get one of those 2 items. So that's definitely a very helpful strategy that's come out in the past couple of years when people are trying to really figure out how to get people to their campaign in the middle of it. And then of course, say thank you. Always say thank you. And it's not just about giving them a shout out on social media or listing them on your website. Write a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note, Because again, you're showing very tangible appreciation to your donors, and that'll make them more likely to come back, especially if you do additional fundraising in the future. But it makes them feel appreciated, and everybody likes that. You know, you're giving your donors warm fuzzies. So make sure to incorporate that very old rule of fundraising into your new forms of doing it. So now I'm almost finished, I promise. So myths. First myth I'm going to debunk for you is angel donors. You know, I mentioned that there are sometimes people who stumble across your campaign if they're on the site or some other way, but that's not a rule. You cannot rely on them. They're few and far between, so it's better to reach out to your audience and really target people that you know. Post it and they will come. This sort of is the same idea. You cannot just post it and expect that people will find it. You need to send people to your campaign and make sure that they actually see it so that they can give. Diamonds for donors. You don't need to give really expensive perks or any really expensive giving levels for donors who give a lot of money. You can reward them with experiences. You can keep it personal. Those sorts of things are definitely better. And then, of course, huge goals equals huge donations, as we saw with the Indiegogo green bar effect. Not always the best idea.
Oh, so huge goals do not increase.
Correct. So Diane mentioned this a little bit. We have a partnership with Indiegogo, so that if you are fiscally sponsored, you can connect an Indiegogo campaign to your fiscal sponsorship. We'll process the donations, we'll issue tax receipts, which is a big incentive because most people are not looking to crowdfunding to get tax deductions. And that actually can increase the average donation given through your campaign. So that's something to think about. She mentioned the fees, so I won't go into more detail about it, but the idea is there are no double fees. You are not going to be charged Indiegogo's 5 to 10% and Fractured Atlas's 7%. We've negotiated it so that you're charged Fractured Atlas is 7%, and then there's the 3% for PayPal processing because that's something that Indiegogo is requiring us to use. So you won't have a hugely inflated fee just by using both. There's also faster funds. Many of these sites will require you to finish the campaign before the funds will be sent to you. Instead, Fractured Atlas only holds donations for 7 days before we make them available for you to release. And then Diane mentioned you go through the regular release process. So you potentially have the opportunity to access these funds within, 10 days of it being pledged through your campaign. And then, of course, there's the tax-deductible donations. Now, really briefly, I'm going to talk about Fractured Atlas's membership so that if you are interested in becoming fiscally sponsored, you have this information too. We have 3 levels of membership. The first is the community level, and that's free, and that allows access to Artfully and Space Finder. The second is called the professional level, and that is $10 a month, and it allows 1 user for our website, and that person also acts as our contact person for the membership, for the fiscal sponsorship. And then there's the organizational level, which is $20 a month and allows up to 3 users for the website. If you're just getting started, I always suggest that people start at the professional level because we can always upgrade you later, and you may not know up front if you have 1 to 2 more people that need to have access to your fund or to your membership. So it's always a good idea to start in one place and then move up if you need to. We have monthly billing for more flexibility. We used to offer annual billing, and what happened was people weren't using our services for the entire year. And there gets to a certain place where you're charging somebody's credit card and you can't refund it anymore. So we were in a situation where we weren't being supportive of artists, and we really wanted to turn that around. So having monthly billing allows for more flexibility for artists who may not use us the entire year, or if they need to sort of downgrade for 1 month and then come back up, that's fine too. Monthly billing allows for that kind of flexibility. Oh, and I think I didn't mention that The professional and organizational levels are the two levels that allow access to fiscal sponsorship and to insurance and as well as the other programs. So signing up is fast. It usually takes about 2 minutes, and it would increase if you were at one of the paid levels, but usually it does not take longer than 5 minutes. It's definitely a quick process. And I wanted to give you a discount code. So if you sign up for membership, you can use this discount code, DianeLA, and it'll give you 6 free months of membership. So if you're going to be a new member, that's definitely an asset for you. So now,
How long is this discount code good for? Like maybe we're not ready right now, but maybe we'll be ready in a few months.
it'll definitely be up for a few months. We usually don't expire them for a year or two. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're ready a little later, we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's Diane LA.
Diane LA. Yep.
Okay, so whatever we wrote down here.
Yep. Diane, all lowercase, LA, uppercase.
LA uppercase.
Yep.
Diane LA discount code.
I'll start back there. Go ahead. Yep.
So, you're recommending the old-fashioned thing about the handwritten thank you note, which of course is great. So that automatically means that in a budget, if you like your example, the $75,000 project, if you have 1,000 donors, you're probably budgeting $1,000 just for thank you notes, right? Between postage and collateral.
Yeah.
So I'm just that much money for that. So that's important for crowdfunding.
Yes. So the question is, obviously, writing thank you notes is going to increase your budget because you have to factor in the cost of buying the notes and actually sending them. And that is true. Yes, it's still, especially if you want to do long-term fundraising, it's a way to engage your donors when they don't expect it.
No,
So
I'm all for it. I'm just recognizing that that's an easy bucket note, the real cost.
Yeah.
And then my other question about just the technicalities of that, because everything else is all social media, but what do you suggest as far as collecting actual snail mail addresses? Because how do you get that in a streamlined way when you're processing credit cards or whatever through online systems like PayPal?
yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, how do you get physical addresses, snail mail addresses, when there is this very streamlined system for actually contributing? And a lot of the platforms will allow you to require a shipping address. Even if you're not offering anything tangible, you can say, I need a shipping address, and your donor will be required to put that in when they make their donation. And then you can find all of that in your dashboard. And if you're fiscally sponsored, you would also be able to find it on your My Fiscal sponsorship page in your donation history.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
My question relates to what she said. Okay, a couple of things. One is the shipping address. Can it be a PO box?
The question is, can the shipping address be a PO box? I don't see why not. If that's their preferred address, then sure.
And then related to what she was saying, the handwritten thank you notes and also what you mentioned. I mean, this is just an idea. What if you had a nice artistically done by an artist, a nice e-card kind of thing that is not handwritten, but professionally done, nicely done e-card that goes out as a thank you card. So that way you save on postage, save on buying the notes, and it is still
right. So the question is, if you have a nicely designed e-card, can you use that instead? I would say I don't see why not. However, you really want to make sure that your communications with your donors are done in the way that they prefer. So if a donor isn't going to appreciate getting an e-card, you shouldn't send them one. You should send them a paper card. And that's really the distinction that you want to make.
But sometimes I find nowadays many people don't even bother with mail. So you have to, in a sense, but some donors are very up on their email, and not donors, but people. So it may vary according to who it is.
Yeah, of course.
So you can have a combination.
You can absolutely have a combination, yeah. I'm going to jump back here, yep.
Okay, so can I just say something to that really fast after having worked in fundraising for a while? When people see ink, they appreciate it so much.
Oh, I see.
Even if they don't care about mail, when they see somebody write, thank you so much for trying.
Oh, it's true. Okay, ink, right?
Yeah, and it's longevity. It's not just about that campaign, but it's about every campaign.
I see. Thank you for that idea. Thank you.
Okay, so my question was, the whole perk idea that you were talking about, like limited edition perks.
Yes.
Do both platforms allow you to update your perks? Because I feel like one of them didn't allow you to change after you've launched.
Okay, so the question is, do both platforms allow changes to your perks after the campaign launches? You cannot change perks that have already been claimed, but I think now both platforms allow you to add new perks. So even if one is sold out, you often cannot increase the number that are available. You would have to add a new perk with the increased number. Yeah. Yes.
I wonder if you have any findings about the all or none versus the flexible platform. I know you said go where your audience is, but it's a little vague to me.
Sure.
When does all or none work better, and what stats or resources can we look at on impact?
I would, I'm not sure, the question is about the all or nothing, the fixed funding model versus flexible funding model, and what's the success rate between the two. So you are going to have a lot, the findings are kind of skewed. And I don't think if there's data on it, it's probably going to live at Indiegogo or at Kickstarter, because they are very supportive of this all or nothing model. It's their whole thing. They think that's what makes crowdfunding successful, because it creates a sense of urgency. So your donors can see that you won't be able to do anything if you don't reach your goal, and that gives them this sense of, I guess, urgency to actually give, so that you can do the work that you want to do, especially if they believe in it. On the other hand, I think the data would be skewed, because more people, if you're doing flexible funding, there is less of an incentive to have a more reasonable goal, right? So there are a lot more inflated goals, and that means that model may not be funded, or may not reach their goal as much. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't raise the funds that they needed to actually do the work. And so a lot of the campaigns, a lot of platforms will suggest that you have a stretch goal in addition to your bare bones goal, and to be really transparent about that. Actually list your expenses out in your story, or the broad categories of expenses, so that you can be really transparent about where that number is coming from, so people do feel that urgency still if you use the flexible funding
And the stretch
model.
would be then we can do XYZ if we get this much more.
Exactly, the stretch, yep.
And then the other thing, I've talked to a number of people, especially filmmakers, who ran it. Well, actually, that's not true. Also artists, sculptor friend, who ran a campaign. It was not successful, and then they're really scared about doing it again, or any advice about. And then also your tip about use your own network. So I've heard a lot of people go, well, we ran out of our own network. We couldn't get beyond the friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all know about social media, etc. But anything you can tell us about those two issues?
Well, I think, so the question is about expanding audience, and sort of also looking at why a campaign might be unsuccessful, I guess is.
And then how to go forward with the next
And how to
round.
go forward with the next round. So I would start, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that can go wrong. It can be about your audience. It can be about the perks that you're offering. Some people don't offer $20 perks, and you're looking at it saying, why are you doing this if most people are coming to give that amount? So I would personally have to sit and look at the campaign to dissect it, to see what could have gone wrong. But I think a lot of places, if you're trying to self-diagnose, I would start by looking at the size of the audience that you were trying to reach, how many people you reached out to, and how that reflected on your campaign. What were you asking for? Did it break down by those numbers? Did you divide it by the $75 average goal, and relate that to your audience? So again, there are a lot of things that could go wrong. Now, expanding your audience is hard. It is definitely hard, and I think one of the the best places to start, again, is to partner with other organizations that are like yours. But also to talk to your audience and say, why did you give? Why did you like my work? What was it about my messaging that didn't come across as clear, or what do you think didn't work? Because evaluating your audience and evaluating your donors can really give you insights that you didn't know about, because you're thinking, oh, I did X, Y, and Z just like everybody tells me to. Why didn't it work? So I would go to them and say why, I think, yep, we have an online question. So the question is about our monthly fee, our membership fee. Is the monthly fee reflective of the past $99 fee for membership that allows access to Fractured Atlas?
Fiscal sponsorship, sorry.
The fiscal, access to fiscal sponsorship. So we did have, is it reflective of the past $99 fee? It's separate. I mean, the $99 fee, it was $95 actually for a little while. We've increased the fee a little bit since then and moved to the monthly flexibility. So there are a few things that have changed in that time. And so, no, I wouldn't say that it is reflective of that, but it's pretty close to on par. Because I think that's only a $20, $25 increase over the span of a year. But even so, the monthly fee when we had the $95 fee was $9.50, so that didn't really change much at all. Yes.
So it's essentially the same thing. So if we want to become members to get fiscal sponsorship, we just pay $10 a month, which comes out to $120 a year.
Yes.
Okay, so that's but we just pay monthly.
Exactly.
Okay,
you're paying
fine.
almost the same amount.
Exactly.
It's just monthly.
So it's the same thing, basically.
Yes. Yep.
Hey, I was wondering, what is the service that Indiegogo does for like personal expenses? That's one, and also I had one unsuccessful Indiegogo campaign that I did, and most of the emails that I got were for other companies providing services for the Indiegogo campaign to make it more successful. Do you, does Fractured Atlas work with any companies like that, like as trusted partners, or?
So the question is about, so what was the first question again? It was about, the life expenses.
Yeah.
So the first one was, what is Indiegogo's life expenses platform? I think it's called Generosity. So I would look up that, and it used to be called Indiegogo Life, and then they rebranded it. I'm pretty sure it's called Generosity.
Okay.
And the second question was about, sorry, I'm having a hard time phrasing it again. Can you say it one more time?
Well, I got more emails than.
Oh, right, the promoters.
From promoters and other people who are like, I can make your campaign more successful, blah, blah, blah.
So you will find that when you run a crowdfunding campaign, especially if you have a lot of momentum at one specific time, during that time you're going to get a lot of emails from people saying, hey, for the low fee of $10,000, I want to promote your work for you. And you're like, one, that is not a low fee, and two, I would be really careful about those, because I do think a lot of them could be scammers. They could be people who are trying to scam you. And so if you were to enter, we do not have any partnerships with any promoters like that, but I usually think if you want to work with an external promoter, the best thing to do is to find a PR company or a media person who is experienced in PR and can help you with that. So that they definitely have that sort of association with their name. People might already know them, and they can really promote it with your best interests in mind instead of their own best interests.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Fractured Atlas specifically had, people that could, would work in that capacity.
Right. So we don't have people who work in that capacity, but we actually have a list of special offers and discounts on our website, and I believe there are a couple PR and marketing firms on there that are offering discounts for their services. So you have to be a community level to access it, but that's, yeah. I know we're a little over time, so. I will hang out for a couple minutes if anybody has any one-on-one questions. Otherwise, we will just end here. And thank you for coming. I hope this was informative. I know it was a lot of information all at once. So
That's great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.